Okay, you're listening. Right, go on then. You're listening, guys. Listen up. Go on. Go on. You had 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. You can't keep chucking away 10, 15 minutes. Right, the life cycle. Yeah, you have the life cycle. You need to understand all the different components of it. Some people will refer to it as Saddam structure as well. Saddam. Right?
Oh, is this the waterfall?
Right, some people will talk about Saddam, right, which is structured design analytical management systems, right? But at school they'll talk about the life cycle. Life cycle, like it infers, so it doesn't really have a beginning and an end. Okay, there should be no end to it. There's no birth to grave thing. Years ago, sorry.
Can you give me the thing?
Life cycle.
Saddam.
The SAM. Oh, structured design analytical management systems. Okay, that's what they will talk about out in industry. They will talk about the life cycle. In school they'll talk about as well the waterfall model. The reason I'm giving you all these different names is that, you know, if you go in the paper and they actually they mention it, okay, if they talk about the waterfall, then you might think, what the hell am I on about with the waterfall? Well, the waterfall is, if you go in books, you'll see things like this. Right, and these would represent the different stages of your project, and they literally go like that. Right, and it would be analysis, design, development, implementation, testing, rollout, and all that. And then they would very often do that as well. Okay, so that's why they call it the waterfall. Okay, but that's very 1990s now. No one really talks about that much.
But what should we put in the paper?
Just talk about life cycle. Just
Not
talk about
the
system.
waterfall
No,
model.
I wouldn't do that now. It's a bit old, a bit out of date now. Just talk about systems life cycle.
And then you say Saddam.
You could mention Saddam if you wanted to, but it depends whether it's going to get marked by somebody that was aware of what Saddam is. If they're not, they might think that you're away with the fairies and you don't know what you're on about. Whereas ironically you are and they're not.
It won't be on the mark scheme though, would it?
Not really, no. But if you say Saddam to people out in the industry, they'll know what you're on about. They'll pick up on what you're on about. They know that you're talking about life cycles and the old-fashioned waterfall, okay, waterfall model. And you need to know absolutely inside out, without any hesitation, all the stages of a life cycle. What's going to be entailed in any of them. Put your phone away, darling. That's good. You don't need your phone. What you need to know is you need to be able to go any time that you like. This is why I always wait until you've done your project before you start doing your theory. Yeah. So if you do the analysis stage, and a lot of these, if you know this as well, will answer other questions. Like a classic question they can ask you is, you know, what is the role or what characteristics do you need to be a systems analyst? But if you know what's in the analysis stage, then all you would do is think, well, what sort of job description would you have for people like that? And you write it down, and that will get you marks. All right. So if you know that a company has got a problem, okay, what you do, you have your first point of contact. Yeah. When you go in and see them, right, what's the first thing that you would do when you walk through the door? You would do a what study?
Feasibility.
Yeah, do a feasibility study.
So the analyst is the first stage of your life cycle?
Yeah. You need to know these, rattle these off. Right, you do a feasibility study. Now this is assuming that they've contacted you with a problem, that they need a solution to a problem. Okay, so you identify the very first problem, or they've identified a problem, haven't they? You don't go around knocking on a door and saying, hello, I'm a systems analyst, you got any problems? Every company's got problems. Okay. You also have to be careful as well that you divorce the target of the organisation from what they do in terms of requirement specs. One girl 1 year turned around and one of her requirement specs was, you know, because she said, what's a requirement spec? And I said, it's what you're hoping to achieve with your new system for your client. And she turned around and said, oh right, and she wrote it all, and the bottom one was to make more profit. Well, that's not a requirement spec, is it? I mean, it's a bit obvious, isn't it?
Isn't that a goal?
It's not, yeah, it's sort of a goal of the organisation. It's part of your business plan, isn't it? Your target and all that sort of thing. It's not really a requirement spec. You can't turn around and say, hey, we bought your new system off you for a couple of million quid. We're not making any more profit. We have our money back. Okay, it's one of those immeasurable things. So you identify a problem. You have a feasibility study. Let's let me make sure that is. Yeah, that's it. I don't have to do this 3 times. When I say feasibility study, what do you think? What are you checking that's feasible?
Got the time, resources.
Yeah, they've got the resources.
Hardware, software.
Yeah, they've got the hardware, they've got the software, they've got the people in place, they've got the accommodation, they've got the inclination to do it. Okay, they've got the wherewithal and sustainability of it. Otherwise, it's bad business. You're never going to get past day one. You're going to keep going around knocking doors and never get anywhere, aren't you? Yeah? Okay, so feasibility study. An economist might, an accountant might turn around and say it's a cost-benefit analysis, something like that. Remember me saying you never spend £1 to, they'll only spend £1 to make £1 and a penny, or save an extra penny over the pound. They won't just spend money just for the sake of it. Alright? So that's your feasibility study. Once you've done your feasibility study, then what do you do? Imagine you're in the building.
Fact-finding.
Yeah, even before you do that, you're just going to go around and start asking everybody anything, are you? Identify who?
Overview.
Identify your end users, yeah? Identify your end users. Why have I put end users and not just end user?
Because it could be the person using it, or it could be the customer. Like, it could be the
decision maker.
Like the manager wants it, but it's not like, but the person who's actually using it might be the person in.
That's it. I mean, you could when you go into a building, the first thing that you do is you identify who your key players are, who your key decision makers are. They're your initial end users. You don't go into, say we needed a system in this building for staff, for teaching, a new computer system. You wouldn't go through the door and say, hey, can I speak to some teachers? You'd knock on the door and say, hey, can I speak to Dr. Neeson? Or can I speak to someone in charge? Okay, they're your initial end users, okay? And in fact, at GO63, they can actually turn around and say, you imagine if you got this question, and it's logical, again, it's common sense. If they turn around and said, what is a pitfall of having too much management involvement in the development of a new system? Classic, that is. Absolutely classic. Yeah, it won't do what the real end user wants to do. And what might the end user feel as well, the real end user feel? They might feel a bit
isolated.
Yeah, they feel as though they've not been involved with it, and so then you're getting all sorts of what issues? Change management issues. Can you see how you can waffle on about half the side? Now, look at the question that I gave you there. The initial involvement might be too heavily orientated towards senior management. What are the implications for the development and implementation of a new system? Now, most people, if they don't know that, they waffle on. And they start going on about, managers might not know what they're on about. The managers might, and the truth be known is you've got change management issues, and you feel that the end user could be isolated and they're not involved in the development of it, yeah? And then you're not getting true interface design feedback, you're not getting true iteration. You see how this all, you're getting all your ducks in a row now, you know, for when you're talking about how you see things through, that is that, and you can write the letters, alright. It's quite easy, but in a complicated way, isn't it? Easy but in a structured way, yeah? So you identify your true end users, they're your decision makers, yeah? Once you've identified them, when you think you're an end user, what are you going to do about that end user? Think about your project, you're going to, what about them? You're going to find out what about them, their
redefinition.
Go, you're right. Well done, Chloe. Role, you find out what their role is within the organisation, which is basically it's a snapshot of their job description. Because that will determine all sorts of things. So the role of the end user within the organisation. So you find out the role of end user. Once you've got that, what about the organisation itself? What are you going to try and get?
overview.
Yeah, a what?
Overview.
Yeah, you're going to get an overview of the organisation. So get an overview of the org. Yeah? The reason that you do that is because the reason that you do this is it's quite difficult to picture this, but you know when you do your project, you're doing all of the sections. You know, you go through the analysis, the design, the development, the implement. You're doing it all yourself. In real life, you would just have one bit of this, then you pass it on, then you pass it on, you pass it on, you get on with your next job, you pass it on. So you would be like just working in the analysis section, or you might work as a designer. But the designers are sitting in a room now, waiting for all your fact finding to be given to them. So you're going to pass that all over to them, and then go off on your next, get your little file out, and go and see your next client. Yeah. While the designers get on with building up their design specs, getting ready to give it to the developers.
So your overview includes fact finding?
Yeah, the overview of the organisation would give the structure of it, the feel of it, because the designers don't get the feel of it. They need to know, is it a profit driven, is it charity based, is it work within a competitive market, is it a trendy organisation? You know, that's going to impact about the look of it. Is it a traditionalist one? They need to get the feel of that organisation and the culture of it, and the structure and the hierarchies. Is it flat? Is it flat? You know what I mean? So that will have all sorts of it. I wouldn't expect any of you to go onto virgin.com now and find some dull, listless, boring website, you know, with an online purchase scheme. I would expect it to be bang in your face, because whoever's gone out there and analysed it all has given the culture, you know, the cultural history and the development and the place within the market and their competitors and who works there and the feel of them, the profile of them. That will impact all sorts. Can you see what I mean? So an analyst is really quite a skilled people person, you know, they need to read things into things. So you've got an overview of the organisation, right? Once you've got your overview, what do you start then? You start fact finding, yeah? You fact find. Can't spell. Alright, start fact finding. Under fact finding, how are you going to fact find? You're going to do what? Questionnaires, interviews, what else?
Observations,
transcripts. documentation, all that sort of thing, yeah? So questionnaires, interviews, observations, transcripts, existing documentation, everything and anything. You can't get enough. You can't get enough. You couldn't go down to back to the office with a little filofax or a little filing box with 2 questionnaires and 1 interview, and they're going to build you a system based upon that. Are you having a laugh, mate? I say, you want us to what? Spend the next 3 months of our life designing something and doing all the design schemes for it based upon 2 questions? Get back down there, can you? You're living there. You live a month in there. You need to go back and be that company. You're the middleman, aren't you, for the designers? Now they could turn around and, like, one of your questions on your green book I did you is what, you know, the features of what are the advantages of using a questionnaire. You need to know the advantages, disadvantages of each of these. What's an advantage of using a questionnaire? You've got immediate what? Yeah, you got immediate, and you can also tailor it to the ends of the client. Yeah, it's anonymous as well, so you can give anonymity, and you can also ask the same questions to a large bunch of people. That's the answer scheme. If you want the answer scheme, I just gave it you. Okay, you can ask the same question to a large bunch of people. It gives them anonymity as well. Interviews, what's good at an interview? If somebody answers something, you can immediately do what?
Direct response.
Yeah, and you could change and give a secondary question immediately, couldn't you? So if you turn around and say, what's your favourite colour? You said blue. I could say, when you say blue, do you mean like a turquoise?
You can read the body language as well.
Good man. Now that's getting post A level, that. Right? You can, because 70% of all communication is non-spoken, isn't it? Right, it's done facially, which is why you have emoticons and lols and your LMAs and your little kisses and your P with your tongue sticking out. An emoticon is an attempt at importing body language into text. Okay, it's not done very well. Right, observations. What is good about an observation? What might you pick up on an observation that you might not get on one of these?
The way in which someone works on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, you might watch them do something that you might not have picked up on. It's horrible when you're being observed, especially under what they used to call time and motion studies. Britain used to be obsessed with T&M studies, right? And they used to follow you around and go with little stopwatches. They have to do everything, especially in manufacturing. And they would turn around and they would watch someone do that, and then they would work out that reaching for the tool over there, they would multiply that 1,000 times in a day, and then multiply by the year, and they would say, do you realise throughout the year, you spend 2.5 weeks of paid employment just reaching for the tool, move the tools closer. And you would save like 10,000 people working for you. Yeah, 10,000 people working for you 1 week, you save 10,000. It translates into thousands of pounds. It's a Japanese philosophy of time and motion study. Actually, and it's to work out exactly how much productivity is produced per hour. It's fascinating, but I don't like watching it. It's horrible. Sorry.
Won't people like put on a false thing?
Yeah, they can do. Yeah, that's the trouble with observations, is they can suddenly become false, can't they, and not show a true reflection of their working practice. What was the T? Transcripts, wasn't it? So transcripts is just copying down what they're doing. So it's getting a hard copy version of what's going on. Because some guy in an office back in, some designer back in, needs to get the feel of it again. Why existing documentation? Why are we obsessed with it?
Design the interface.
Yeah, it helps you. Yeah, it's part of the iteration, and it gives the end user feel as though they've got a bit of ownership. And people don't like change. People hate change. If they go from, well, I like working this way. I've done this for 20 years. Now you want me to do it that way. You can overcome that by. You lot are obsessed with aircon, aren't you? Is there like a real narrow boundary of comfort? It must be between 64 and 66.3. Otherwise, I'm too hot and they're too cold.
Not right for it there. Got 2 hands.
So existing documentation.
Existing documentation is to help you create a user-friendly interface that will hopefully reduce, change management issues later on. Okay. So once you've done all your fact-finding, and hopefully you've done, look at your questions. What do you? Are you just going to go and ask them some random questions? I would hope that if you were going there, you would talk about reasoning behind the reasoning behind your fact-finding methods. Your questionnaire is reasoning behind each question. Now listen up, once you've got your questions, you've got an answer, then what are you going to do?
Redefinition of the problem.
Yeah, well no, should elicit more, a secondary set of questions.
Oh, back up.
No? So theoretically, each of these should theoretically elicit a secondary set, okay, which is a redefinition. So that will allow you to then redefine the problem. Each of those should elicit, E-L-I-C-I-T, should elicit a secondary response. So if I ask you a set of questionnaire, 20 questions, that should immediately evoke another 20, 30 responses that I have to develop more questionnaires from. Because that's all part of the iteration process. Iteration is the process of going backwards and forwards until you can refine what you're trying to achieve. Yeah? It's like you imagine if you go and get measured up for a suit now. If Charlie wanted to go and get measured for a suit, I wouldn't expect him to go once. I expect if you're going to spend 300-400 quid on a suit, I would expect you to go 3-4 times. You know, because you might have to pop back down. They'll call you back down and say, "Can you come back down? We just want to go through your measurements again. Look at the threads, look at the cloth. Do you want double stitching on this? Do you want that? 3, 4 until you've iterated it, yeah."
I thought you just iterated your design.
No. Iteration, like, Charlie, come on, love, listen up. Go. Iteration. If they say to you, when is iteration important? It's important at any stage, which is why it's so crucial. You know, during the development, that you actually send them something just to play around with during the development and actually give it that heading. Remember me saying? So that's even once you've finished with the client, even while you're developing it, because it's almost like giving them a prototype to play around on, isn't it? And then changing something as a result of it. Okay. So you redefine the problem. Once you've redefined the problem, are you just going to say your problem is you need a VAT system, or are you going to atomize it? You're going to break it down into what? Into a rec spec, yeah. So you redefine. Come on, I'm not doing this if you're going to mess about. Right, if you're going to redefine the problem, right, what you do is you break it down into requirement spec. Into your rec spec. Yeah, your rec spec it's just an itemised list of the objectives. Use these words. So it's an itemised list of the objectives that you hope to achieve with the new system. So it's an itemised list of the objectives that you're going to hope to achieve with the new system.
Say it again, please.
Right, it's an itemised list of the objectives that you hope to achieve with the new system. Right, so and it's going to be literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and at the end of it, you're always within your rec spec. Always within your rec spec. Right, you always include a time frame. So you always include a time frame. And nearly every year for the past 10 years, the governors the feedback from the examiners says the same feedback again and again and again, that the student still fails to understand the difference between requirement spec, design spec and system spec. Every year it says they still have trouble. Charlie, stop playing with your phone now. Come on, we use our grown-up voice in the 6th form now.
You can do it.
Come on, love, nothing's that funny. 9 grand down the toilet ain't funny, love. Come on, put it away. You'd be better spending it on drugs and selling it, you'll make more money. Could be worse, I could be spending 200 quid a week on it. Right, on your requirement spec, yeah, you put your time frame on it, okay, and it'll also, that forms part of your contract. That forms part of your contract. Shh, come on, stop messing around now. Come on, I'm not spending an hour while you sit giggling. Get a panto if you want to laugh. Right, so you're seriously, you're going to have to revise from book soon. I ain't doing this. I ain't spending an hour after you leave compressing and uploading this so you can play around. Some iPhones, nightmare. I'm going to get a phone scrambler in here soon.
Put it in your bag shower.
You'll find out when I get it. I'll just put a 20 quid phone scramble. None of you'll get a phone in it.
Phone scrambler.
Work it out, Einsteins.
It scrambles up the words.
No, it scrambles up your phone. It'll kill your signal in this room. Scoping it. Okay. Right, so once you've got your requirement specification, and once you've got your rec spec...
after they've signed it?
Well, yeah, that really forms part of your scoping procedure, doesn't it?
They sign it, don't they? And then you
put
them in it, then they can't change it.
If you get a rec spec is scoping the project. Because if you don't scope it, when you go to see them, what they'll do, and it's a client's nature, is they'll say, while you're here, will you have a look at this? While you're here, will you have a look at that? Each time they say, while you're here, will you have a look at that? That is supposed to be, that should theoretically take you straight back up to here. The minute they say, can you have a look at that, you would say, if you work for me, I'd hope you would turn around and say, can you not just refer that back to the sales team? Because they've got another problem. Otherwise, if you're not careful, you go in there, and they expect you to come up with a cure for cancer. You know, you're supposed to go in just to help them out, do a booking system for their holidays, or a VAT system, or something that would maybe do a work scheduling system for a factory. While you're in there, they'll say, can you give us a hand, you know, on the purchasing side of that while you're here? Will you have a look at that? And say, well, let the office know. And they would start a whole new cycle. Okay, so a scope, when you scope a system, that's your rec spec scopes it, puts a lid on it, puts a box around it, all right? Now, on the time frame, that's absolutely crucial. That's absolutely critical that you put a time frame on it, that you're going to be done within a certain time frame. Okay, because if you start leaving it open-ended, there's all sorts of implications for payments and things like that. And the rec spec, because I used the word objectives, I said it's a list of objectives that you hope to achieve for the client. The reason I did that is when we get to the testing section, you'll see the word objectives used all the time. It gives you something to test that you can be paid for. Not test for testing the functionality of it. We're not going to test the system spec here. We're not going to test the design spec. That's alpha and beta testing for the client shop. What we're testing here is something that they can sign off so that we can get payment for it and they can say that they're happy with it. All right, you understand that? Now the rec spec precedes the what next stage?
Design.
Now if you had said that in a paper 2 years ago, you'd got 1 mark for having saying the rec spec precedes the design stage. Believe it or not, I mean, to me that is like, and yet they're giving a mark for it. When you're in there, can you all state the obvious? Every one of you state the obvious. Just keep writing and keep stating the obvious. Whack a bit of tech in there and relate it all the time, but just keep stating the obvious. Every one of you said, oh, the requirement spec precedes the design stage. Every one of you, I doubt if anyone would have said that in there and dropped a mark, you know. And yet, you know, someone last year got 2 marks off a B, gutted or what. So these silly little 1-2 markers. So then we go on to the design stage, yeah? Right, in the design stage, the ultimate purpose, the ultimate goal of the design stage is to come up with a design
Spec.
Design spec, yeah. That's the actual role of the design spec. And just because you had the iterative process in the first stage doesn't mean say you start dropping that off when you get to the design stage. You know, you're supposed to keep going backwards and forwards, let them have a little look at it. This is where you might start giving them real basic prototypes to have a little look at, you know, interfaces and things like that. Some books would tell you that the prototype stage is done in the implementation, you know, development, the developmental stage. Some books would turn around and say that prototyping starts in the design section. Which, if you were doing something that was heavily based online, I would suggest it happens there, wouldn't you? If you were doing a big online store for someone like B&Q, Argos, I would expect you to start prototyping it in the early design stages, giving them some real cut down looks and feels of it. Do you like the look of that? Do you like the feel of that? Before you start committing, you know, to developing it. Can you understand why? Because it's a very visual thing, isn't it? Yeah. Now in the design spec, you need to understand the contents of the design spec, and this is where you would need to know your inputs, your outputs, any error messages, any VBs, right, any macros, any validations.
Wait, we need to know these before we start?
It's the contents of a design spec. If they turn around to you and say, what's the difference between a requirement spec and a design spec, I would hope that you would say the sort of following thing. You'd say, no, the requirement spec is what you arrive at the end of the analysis stage after all your fact finding. It forms the basis of your agreement with the client. It includes a time frame, and it's a list of objectives that can be tested later on when you complete the project, as opposed to the design specification, which would identify all the inputs, processes, outputs, validations, verifications, macros, visual basics.
But don't you need to do your design spec at the end? Okay.
End of what? Well, at the end of the design stage. Well, no, if I say to you, right, here's this company, here's a company here, and they want the following, I would expect you to start then designing it up and sketching it all out. I'd expect you to start doing your entity relationship diagrams, your DFDs, your dependencies, you start showing all your validations. It's all the gubbins, it's the bare bones, it's the nervous system of the organisation.
What are the visual basics?
It's all your VBs, isn't it? It's all your programming. You start sketching it all out.
All the nested if statements?
Yeah, all that sort of thing. It's the gubbins of it, isn't it? Imagine if you were doing a design specification of a Boeing 747. Can you imagine how complex, you know, with all the cabling and all the lasers and all the PCBs and printed circuit boards and all the I think it's like how many 10 million components on a Boeing 747 that actually physically move. Can you imagine how many teams of design engineers are put on that to come up with a drawing so that the engineers can actually build it? You know, it's phenomenal. And similarly with a big system, software designers, massive job, massive. Can you imagine if you were designing something for the passport office, and you had to go in, you know, like EDS I did about 15 years ago, massive, huge. It was a 5-year project. I think it was one of the most expensive in Europe. Just the design team alone, there'd have been 30, 40 people in it, and you would have been given one little element of it. Yours might have just been, I don't know, the security design part of it. Somebody else's might have been the database. Like, massive. Went on for years and years. That guaranteed hundreds of people's jobs for years, and it was tens of millions of pounds up front with a maintenance contract to a couple of £1 million thereafter every year, you know. So when I talk about a design spec, it's really, really complex, you know. If you imagine all the inputs and outputs of a passport system for the UK, fourth richest country on the planet, and how many millions of travellers a month, you know. So are we all good with the design section, yeah? And you might start tentatively. So that's what you end up with, the design spec. And then you might start doing basic prototyping, right? Very basic prototyping as it leads into the developmental stage. As it leads into the developmental stage. This is where you actually build it. If I just said prototype to you there. Right, what different sorts of prototypes can you get?
Throwaway.
Yeah, you get throwaway. Good girl. Throwaway on what?
Crack.
No.
That's very good.
Throwaway and
Development.
developmental. Throwaway and developmental. It's when you've gone through the design section, you've given them some. This all forms part of the iterative process. You've looked at your existing documentation. You've come up with an agreement of them that they're happy with the look of it, the interface of it. An interface is where 2 points meet. Yeah, Charlie, put your phone away. And then what you do is your prototype, which is where you can actually give them a cut down version. So a prototype, if they say what's a prototype, why is it useful, and what does it form part of with a system's life cycle? If you came out and I told you, you'd go, oh God, why didn't I say that? Because it's so easy.
Cut down.
Right, a prototype is just a cut down version of the actual system that you're going to give them. Okay, it forms part of the iterative process, and you start giving them it at the end of the design and the start of the developmental section. And it comes in two types. You can either have it as throwaway or developmental. Throwaway means you let them have a play on it and then they give you feedback and then they stop using it altogether and throw it away. Developmental is where you let them have a play on it, and as they're playing on it, then you go on site and you keep changing it. Okay, so it evolves over a period of time, yeah? So it builds up over a period of time. Are you good with that? What's the danger of giving people a throwaway prototype?
They could take
Or
it
any of
and
these prototypes?
Take it and use it, couldn't they? They won't be right.
They could run with it. They could run with it. You could spend 2 months of your life, 3 months of your life as a company, analysing something, designing it, give them a throwaway, and then they turn around and say, this actually doesn't half work, but this works reasonably good. We're happy with it. It hasn't got the full bones and the meat behind it, but we'll keep it, sack them, get rid of them. And then that's bad business because they've got your name on a system, haven't they, that they're using. And that's one of the dangers of it, that people start utilising something that's cut down. Sorry?
You don't copyright it or something.
Well, no, they pay for it. In fact, remember, that's the advantages of having a bit of software written for you. Do you remember in year 12? You own it, as opposed to off the shelf. So you've owned it. So you can be working away on it, and it just gives a bad impression of everything. It's bad for their business, bad for yours. So that's your developmental stage. Once you've got to the end of your developmental stage, what do you have there? Because let's just say, ta-da, it's finished. You need to do what?
Testing.
Yeah. Well, sort of. You can run this side by side, really. You can test it and do what? Similar. I'm assuming that you're going to test it. Yeah, so I'll do it. Right, two different types of testing.
Alpha and beta.
Alpha, beta. Alpha is by yourselves, yeah. So you can alpha test it, which is by whoever has designed it, developed it, built it. Beta testing is going to be by clients, yeah, or by third persons. That's why sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, I've got a copy of Microsoft 2014 here. It's a beta copy. Do you want to have a play with it? Right, alpha, just think of it as letters of the alphabet, alpha, beta, A and B. And so obviously the first people that are going to test it are the people that build it, and the second ones that can test it are going to be people that have had no input in the design and development of it. So it's out in the marketplace, yeah? You good with that? Now they could turn around, like it said on their, like on that question in your green book, and say, what is the importance of testing and test plans? At what stage of the cycle there would you bring your test plan in? Where would you start bringing it in?
What was your question, sorry?
Right, where would you put your test plan in?
In the right hand?
Yeah, I'd put it around there. Around the rec spec design stage, that's where I'd put it, especially design stage, because you've got two tests, haven't you? You've got the test that it meets all the objectives for the client, and then you'll actually have the functionality testing there. So you put a blank test plan in. All the blank test plan. Now they could turn around and say, what will you test for? Like in the design section there, well, you need to test for extreme, erroneous and normal data. That's a classic data type, that, data testing. If they say what sort of tests could you give it in the design section, hopefully you would say, I would test for the following data types: extreme, erroneous and normal. Extreme, erroneous and normal. So let's just do it for a date. So I'll show you examples. Normal, I'm going to test for 1 to 31 on days and it should function. Extreme, I'm going to put 32 in and see if it breaks it. Erroneous, I'm going to put the letter F in and see if it breaks it. So erroneous is rubbish, extreme is outside the parameters, normal is what is expected.
Wait.
They're the three standard tests that you would put under a blank test plan. Yeah. Data type tests. Right, normal, extreme, and erroneous. No, they're data type tests, they are. So I would expect, if you ever build a system on anything, right, you're supposed to, now you're not doing it on your project because all you're doing is, all that's required on the math scheme is that you test your your requirement spec objectives. That's all you have to test. Up until about 2 years ago, you used to have to test all the design spec stuff. You know, the import, the processes, the validations, nightmare. One girl 1 year did 25 sides of tests. 1 year, 25 sides on a table. Test number, test description, expected outcome, actual outcome, data type, signed off, and that was it. And it was just 25 pages of them. You would have to test every formula, every validation, every macro, everything. And it went on and on. She spent like a week doing that. The beauty of it is guys don't even have to do that. Your testing should be a 20-minute job. Hers was a week, a whole week. I'll try and dig it out somewhere for you and show you.
Normal is within boundaries.
Normal is within boundaries. Say that you're doing a data feed. Say you've done a field, you know, for a date. Normal data type, would you put normal data into it, see if it responds normally? So you would go for like 1 to 31 on days, 1 to 12 for months, 1 to 52 weeks for years. Extreme, you put it outside the boundaries to try and make it break, to try and crash it, yeah? But then erroneous, just put rubbish in, data not expected. So normal, extreme, erroneous, data testing on blank test manager.
What's erroneous?
Right there.
Wrong, rubbish. Wrong, rubbish. Putting a letter in when it expects a number, stuff like that. So, moving on, if I can find it. Right, so testing is done by the people that build it, develop it. Beta testing is by clients and people outside the normal, you know, that sometimes you'll be too close to see it, you can see mistakes. And then you have your different data types, normal, extreme and erroneous that you test. A blank test plan, they could turn around and say, why is it so important at the design stage to include testing? Because you've got nothing to test. Okay, that's another classic type A level question. Why is it, and that's what messes with your head a bit, because you'll go, Christ, you know, why am I don't know. And you have one of those I don't know moments, right? I would expect you to come up with, because, you know, it's only when you know all those that you could thoroughly list them all, isn't it? Do you understand what I mean? It's only when you're designing all those, that's the time to identify what you're going to test. You don't build that 747, look at it on the runway and go, hey, it looks good that, doesn't it? What are we going to test? Let's test it flies, shall we? Or let's test the brakes work. You'll probably end up thinking of about 8 tests for something that's got like 20 million components on it. So it's when you're building and designing something, that's when you can thoroughly identify everything that needs testing. You know, it's like bottom-up testing, isn't it? Do you understand what I mean? You know, when you're designing things, oh, that'll need testing. I'll do that.
Test as you go along?
You can do, but you have like dependencies, don't you? If I change that, that changes that, changes that, changes the other. You know?
Would you know just like to do, like on a plane, like, you know, the wheel structure? Would you not test that as one as you're going along as well?
Yeah, you wouldn't. I wouldn't. You could do, yeah. This is because you're doing DT and design work, isn't it? Yeah. Is that what they tell you to do in DT? Design as you go along?
Not really. What? It just makes sense.
Oh, yeah. No, I would expect. Yeah, you probably will. Yeah, because otherwise, if that fails, that could have implications for someone else, couldn't it?
Identify any tests that need to be done, like when you're
Right,
doing like
if I can find where I'm at here. Right, so back to testing. Because they do love asking you about testing. It will only be a 5 or 6 marker, but it's nice if you can write a good side of stuff down on it, yeah? So you could talk about what, and they might turn around and say, why is it why is it important to do the test design, testing, the blank test plan at the design stage, is to ensure that you can cover all of the design specification, input processes, outputs, and identify everything that needs to be tested before it actually being built. They could also turn around and say, what is the importance of testing? Yeah, but you can listen to it again, love, can't you? Yeah, no, you can have it 100 times. Well, watch film and write it and pause and write and pause from that. If they say to you, what is the importance of testing? Why is it so important to test, right? You've got to understand that it's to give a user confidence. It's to give an end user confidence. If they don't have confidence, you can have change management issues. They're not going to take up on it. The minute that you have no confidence, it's like you're not going to get in a car where you think the brakes might not work, ain't nobody going to get in it. So it's to give end user confidence.
What about to make sure that it's tailored to the needs of the customer?
So what?
To make sure it's tailored to the needs of the customer, because you're
Well, it's to make sure.
back to the rec spec, aren't you?
Yeah, it's to make sure that you're hitting the rec spec, because if you're not, you're in breach of your contract, aren't you? You're not going to get paid. So it's to make sure that you get end user confidence, to make sure that you hit all the objectives specified in your rec spec. Can you think of anything else? Why is it important to test it?
Make sure it works.
Yeah, make sure it works. Make sure it does what it's supposed to do. Right, there's loads of other things, but they're the obvious in-your-face stuff, yeah? So, once you've tested it, then what are you going to do? We're happy with it, we've analysed it, we've designed it. Yeah, we install it. Right, and we'll say that's implementation. We now need to implement it. At GCSE, when you implement anything, it means you do it. At A level, when you implement something, it means you're rolling it out, you're installing it in the company. Use this sort of jargon, yeah? You roll out and you install. Right, so if anybody says that I'm on the rollout team, if anyone's on the rollout team, it just means that you go and you take it to the client. Okay, are we all good to go? Right, different ways, different approaches that you can roll out. Can anyone think of any? Don't come out of the room and go,
parallel,
do you know I couldn't think of any?
Parallel, phased, crash. Pilot, yeah.
Crash also cool. Right, this hasn't been asked for a year or two, so this is like one of the hot topics. They might ask you this. And it wouldn't be big, but again, you only need a couple here, before you can come out with a half decent score, yeah? So parallel is what it says. Run one alongside the other. Now you can only do that if you've got the manpower to do it. You can't go into an organisation where they've only got like maybe 4 or 5 people and you can say, right, I need a team of people to run this side by side against the other, and we haven't got the manpower for that. Okay? So you would also do that in maybe a high risk environment, you know, where loss of data is critical. If you were to bring it in, because you know you haven't had any feedback yet from, so you haven't had you might have not had proper beta testing from it, you haven't got total confidence in it. You might go to the organisation and say, look, I'd like to run it parallel because you're running a really risky environment here. And if my new system, if we out with the old and in with the new, if you use my new and something goes wrong, I've killed your business. Okay. So
high risk environment.
Parallels go for a high risk environment, but they need the manpower to do it. They need the resources to run it side by side with the old method. Yeah. Phase, right, phase that could also be used within a higher risk environment because it's slowly bringing one in and slowly taking the other out. You don't get too much dependency. Instead of going in and going, hey, stop doing that, now do it this way.
Wait, can you
that
say
could
phase
be
again?
Phase is where you start sort of bleeding it into the company bit by bit. So a bit at a time. You might start phasing it in. You might turn around and say, oh, we're going to do it in accounts, then we're going to do it in this. I mean, until bit by bit, you phase it across the whole organisation. That's also quite good, you know, for a high risk environment. Crash and direct, you would use that in a small organisation where they haven't got massive data dependency.
Smash it in there.
Yeah, you crash and direct, out with the old, in with the new. Stop what you're doing, you're going to work on a new method of doing it. So that's high risk. And it's also, you wouldn't do that with BT, you know, where they've got 20,000 employees. Can you imagine the nightmare? I mean, they're going to rue the day they ever saw you. You go back to it and you say, how's everything working out? Well, we've had like 400 people resign. We've got 16,000 on the sick. Most of our clients are in a nightmare over everything. So crash and direct, very dangerous, very high risk, but you could use it for low response, data with low importance, low relevance.
So like, not like a bank.
Yeah.
So crash is where you take.
Out with the old, in with the new. Pilot is where you pick one part of the organisation. You pilot it in one part. Okay, you just pick one element of the organisation and you run it there and you see how it goes. And if it goes all right, then you might go and you might turn around and say, yeah, right, we're going to roll it out across the whole organisation. A lot of big organisations have constantly got someone somewhere in it piloting it, something or other. They'll be look at me with the VLE. I'm piloting it.
Piloting it with the 13.
Yeah, well, the new VLE. The new VLE. You're the only ones with access to it. You're the only one. So if you think about what I'm doing, each of these aren't mutually exclusive, which means you don't just go for one or the other. I do them all. I'm paralleling your education with the VLE, aren't I? I haven't come in today and said, right, just VLE. I'm not turning up again. but you've got access to it. So I'm running.
So with the VLE, you're doing both parallel
I'm
and
doing nearly
pilot?
all of them, aren't I? I'm doing nearly all of them except that, because your A level is too important for me just to come in one day and suddenly go, the hell with it. Everyone, you're doing everything on the VLE now. Because two of you might not respond to that. You might not be able to get it. You might not have access. You might not learn that way. You might have browser trouble at home. You might have. There's all sorts of problems. And two of you failed. Right, I'm going to go. Never mind. The others did all right. So I run it side by side. I'm phasing it bit by bit. If you notice, even just by virtue of me recording this today, now I'm phasing out the written and the written word for you bit by bit by bit. It's being pushed out by media because you respond to media. That's why you're always on your phones all the time. I don't see you sitting there. Oh, I can't put this book down. But half times I can't put this phone down. So if that's the way that you learn, then obviously that's the way that I want to start developing it, isn't it? So I'm phasing it across the board. I'm not too happy about crash and direct. I might one of these days just suddenly go, that's it. In fact, there is an element of that because I can't remember the last time I bought a textbook. And then you've got
doing it on this so we can put it on our phones and stuff like
yeah,
that?
if you want it. And then pilot it as well. I'm piloting it. You're the pilot. You're year 13. And then if this works well, filming it like this, I'm then going to do it for year 11. All of year 11 have actually said to me when they found out you're doing it, oh, can you do our theory like this as well? Because clearly they don't want to have to go home and read books. You told me any 16-year-old lad that wants to go home and read a book. Whereas they'll turn around and say, can I get it on my phone, on the iPad, can I get it on the computer? They're happy with that, you know? So you can see I'm doing a combination of each of those. So they're different rollout methods, they're different implementation methods. Are you all cool with that? What, is it the aircon now? Has it gone too cold?
It's absolutely freezing.
It's so private school.
Are you on
Really
a private
are.
school?
Do you actually want?
Well, so imagine the state. They don't all whine about how it's not long below 68.4
Only because they
degrees
don't have
Fahrenheit.
aircon.
But some of them do. They do.
So weird.
Okay, that's the implementation. What comes after implementation? Are you just going to walk away with it? Are you just going to walk away and go, right, cheers, can I have your money and go? Are you going to leave people on site?
Oh, maintenance.
Oh yeah. I expect you to. Right, I expect you to understand that when you install it, you're going to put a training team on site. Now I'm going to do the training, CVT, Cal, off-site, on-site, and all the rest. I'm going to do that later on. But let's just say that we're going to train them, obviously. Okay. Part of the training as well. Now I would also expect you to understand about your documentation.
Use the manuals.
You use the manuals. If I said to you something is self-documenting, what do I mean?
Like it's self-explanatory via
On-screen
manuals
help.
and stuff like
If
that.
anything, if you go in that exam room and it says self-documentation, it's on-screen help. It's on-screen help. It's not in the box. You don't take it out. It's self-documents. And so you would need to know the advantages of self-documentation, which is wherever you've got the software, you've got the documentation. You don't have to take it with you. You can't lose it. Okay, you don't have to worry about understanding it. It can be interactive as well. You can do search facilities on it. So if you're on a spreadsheet, that's self-documentation. With Excel. Like you want to know how to do a nested if statement, you click on the question mark, type in if, scroll down and there's a nested if statement guide. So you need to know what self-documenting is, okay, and why it's so important. Similarly, they could say to you, what is the nature of an error message that is so important that you should stick to? It should have a unique identification number, it should hopefully be audible, so beep, it warns you, and it should have a unique reference number that can cross-relate to your user documentation. Okay, and it should also maybe be put in a pop-up window as well. Okay, you good with that? And maybe on the mark scheme you might get an extra mark saying give them a warning colour like a red. So you're trying to hit all the buttons.
But in China that means a pink.
Yeah, that's right. Now training, I'm going to do training later on with you as part of another lesson, yeah? But once you've trained them, you've rolled it out, you've crashed it in, or you've piloted it, or you've paralleled it, are you just going to walk away? Or are you going to leave a maintenance crew there? This is going back now. This is going back to, the cycle here. Okay, we've got a full cycle going round. That there. See how you go down here and you leave them maintenance.
How much of a side should I leave for training?
The side. Where are we? Right, so maintenance. Now, whenever you're in that exam room, if you hear maintenance, I want you to think of a maintenance man and his cap.
Is this that implementation?
No, finish that now. A maintenance man and his cap.
Oh, I remember you teaching.
Cap. So you got the maintenance, you're going to leave that. This is where the real money is, 9 times out of 10 in industry, to be honest with you. So you shouldn't trivialise this. Don't turn around and sort of think, Oh right, we've done all that work, now we'll just do a little bit of maintenance and stitch up. This is where you leave people on site, the big players, EDS, IBM, any of the big ones, any of the real big players, wherever they've gone and installed a big system, you can guarantee they'll leave behind a crew of people. They go to Manchester Airport. If you go to Manchester Airport and say, where's the EDS office? They'll say, oh, down there. They'll have left 4 or 5 people in there to do passport control.
Where do they get the people from? Does that mean they're forever
employees? Let's just say that you're a bit good at everything, and what you'll do is, because when you leave something on site, you'll get loads and loads of little issues about this, and they might turn around and say, oh, and they pick up loads of extra sales tips, and they'll turn around. If you go down the Manchester Airport, you've got the EDS office there, and where my wife worked at Cadbury's, she didn't work for Cadbury's, but she worked for the software house that installed everything there for them. And there's like 10 of them up on the mezzanine floor with all the computers. They don't work for Cadbury's, they're working for a subsidiary big computer firm, you know. But they've been there for years, they've been there for longer than Cadbury's have been there.
She's still there?
Well, now she works from home now for them, for craft. Right, so you've got corrective,
adaptive and productive.
Is it productive?
I don't know. Guess. Preventive.
Perfective. So corrective, adaptive, perfective. Please don't come out of that room and they have some kind of maintenance and you blow that. Please. This is out of everything. This is the GCSE, learn it, chant it, easy to remember, year 12. Corrective is obviously where you're going to debug it. You're left on site to debug it because as they're working through it, they're finding problems that your testing didn't pick up, your design spec testing didn't pick up, and they'll turn around and say, oh Christ, when we try and do this we get an error message on our VAT account. Or they go and see the people in the support office and they might go in there and go, Charlie, can you have a little look? You go in and have a little look, you could fix it. It saves having to go back to the whole team, yeah? So that's where you debug it and you refine it. Adaptive, now this is where I got slagged off last year that my lot that did their project didn't mention any adaptive maintenance procedures in their user documentation. Adaptive is going back to the previous lesson, you know, with the pest and the swap and how you react to external influences. So you need to understand your pest and your SWOT analysis and how you adapt to them. Okay, now most
like
people
changing, always making changes.
Well, you imagine if you're doing one for who's doing one for a quotation system. Right, you're doing a quotation system. You would need to factor something into your adaptive maintenance procedures to make an allowance for changes in tax like VAT. What if that goes down to 17.5% again? Is there instructions in your manual to show how to change tax rates? How about if you're doing a wage bill and you do PAYE and it's 22.5%? Does it show you how to go in and adapt to changes in external influences upon your organisation? Now, no one last year made mention of that. They didn't do adaptive maintenance procedures in their technical or in their technical documentation, and they actually mentioned it. So this year I've actually got, if you notice on the checklist, I've said put a section in there, adaptive maintenance. There's a reason I do everything. I never do anything for life's too short to do things for no reason.
Do you have to choose a maintenance method that's appropriate for your business, or do you have to self-explain every single one?
You would have all of these.
All of them?
Yeah, you'd have to, yeah. Now, so a corrective is to debug it, adaptive is to maintain it in relation to external influences upon an organisation. Perfecting is just to tweak it and make it better. Okay, perfective is just to tweak it and make it better. Okay, now each one of these, if you think about a life cycle of a system over 18 months, okay, now if I said to you a traditional life cycle is over 18 months, each one of these would have all sorts of implications, wouldn't they? Because you go and start there in January 2011 and you finished it in October 2014, you got 2.5 years of gone from seeing the problem, to actually rolling out, installing it, training it and all the rest. Look at the corrective, look at especially the adaptive, look at the perfective, everything is changing.
So can you say corrective and adaptive again? Perfective I've got tweaking and making it better.
Oh, that's corrective.
Right,
Perfective, sorry.
Right, corrective, Charlie, put your phone away. Come.
What if you have like new software?
Right, corrective is correcting any bugs in it, any errors, any faults, anything like that, yeah? That haven't been picked up on testing.
What are you doing?
Corrective is finding anything that you need to correct on the system, alright? That hasn't been picked up by test plans. Are you alright with that? Adaptive is changing it to make an allowance for any external influences upon the organisation that might have come in since going to see them the first time. Tax, legislation, demography, anything that's changed about the nature of their environment that they operate in, you might have to change it and adapt it, yeah? Perfective is where you're going to tweak it and make it streamlined for them. You're going to make it better for them. Alright?
Okay.
You good with that?
Yeah, do you not have like to combine it?
It's all of them. Maintenance will form all of them. Okay. And very rarely does it fall into each one of those, but they're what you might leave a team of people on site for. Okay, you would say that they're the corrective, adaptive, perfective maintenance team. Okay, so that there is the whole of your life cycle. That's the whole of the life cycle.
Is that one chapter?
2/3 of chapter 2. 2/3 of chapter 2.
What was chapter 1? We done chapter 1.
Don't worry about chapters.